of the Ad Podcast. We've got an exciting guest for you tonight from the world of sports marketing. We're going to talk about college football. We're going to talk about the Super Bowl. We're going to talk about gambling. We're going to talk about all the good stuff tonight. Bill Lee is a seasoned media executive specializing in strategic media planning, digital media, and sports marketing. He serves as the VP of Media and previously Group Director of Media Services at rEvolution. rEvolution is an independent, fully integrated sports marketing and media agency founded in 2001, headquartered in Chicago with multiple offices. rEvolution focuses on brand building programs for clients in sports, including sponsorship consulting, media planning and buying, creative production, experiential marketing, social media, PR, and research. Bill has over 18 years experience, is described as strategic, analytic-minded, and highly knowledgeable in the digital media landscape. And he has progressed through roles at rEvolution since around 2017, building expertise in modern media campaigns for major multinational clients. Prior to that, he held positions at agencies like Starcom MediaVest Group, Mindshare, managing traditional and cross-channel media for brands such as American Family Insurance. He is a Chicago native, South Side. Lee played college football as a strong safety at Carthage College. He's passionate about the NFL draft, do-it-yourself home projects, and stand-up comedy. He's based in Palos Hills area of Chicago and has earned praise for his leadership, quick learning in dynamic industries, and team-oriented approach to the business. Bill, thanks so much, man. Appreciate you coming on and chatting with us a little bit.
No problem, man. Thanks for the intro. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could have done any better myself, to be honest. That's great. Good job.
Well, strangely enough, I don't know if you've been following the news, but OpenAI had some outages this week. So for the first time, I let Grok take a stab at my bio preparation. And man, I got to tell you, Grok is way better than OpenAI. I don't know.
There you go. That's great. It's good to know. It's good to know how to prep there.
Yeah, well, I think it pulls in a little bit more of the personal stuff, which is kind of fun. So, all right, I know I gave you a pretty in-depth bio there, but you want to walk us through where you grew up, where'd you study, and how'd you get into the advertising industry?
Yeah, you mentioned it, born and raised Southside kid, Chicago, Illinois. Found myself at Carthage College, which is a small D3 liberal arts school. Played football there for a couple years. And was always really interested in just business administration, marketing. Had a couple jobs out of college, weren't great fits. I was in the collection business, was not a fun fit for me. And then kind of started looking into media agencies in Chicago and poked around and ended up landing a job at Zenith Media. So that was really the start. 2006, landed at Zenith Media. Aging myself right now because started in more of the print area, newspaper print, magazine print, and then essentially kind of grew in just different channels, different roles as my career went along. So kind of found myself in out-of-home media, did a lot in the out-of-home space, and then started thinking more about the strategy side and how do we actually approach audiences and things of that nature. So that kind of my career kind of catapulted from there and really got caught up in strategy and worked on some really big brands, Sprint. You'd mentioned American Family Insurance. So yeah, really just had some good experiences and have kind of grown in that strategic space, but also still have kind of that activation background, which is kind of cool. So have kind of played both sides of the field a little bit.
I love it. So I think it's always nice to be talking to a true sports marketer Super Bowl week. So would love to get your commentary on the fact that the Super Bowl has eclipsed $10 million in ad spots for the first time. The price has gone into, what is that, 11 digits? I don't even know.
Crazy.
But, it's still the biggest night in show business. It's still an amazing PR opportunity. It's a very campaignable moment. I saw Walter Goggins goggle glasses ads last week still running on YouTube. So they got a full year of run out of that campaign. Would love to hear a little bit on your perspective of the $10 million price tag eclipsing. And, is that buy still worth its punch from a media buyer's perspective?
Yeah. I mean, when you think about just where audiences are and how things are so fragmented, it's events like the Super Bowl that kind of bring everybody together. You know, it's very rare nowadays that you're having these huge splash events on TV. Even you look at the Grammys, you look at the Oscars. It's not the draw it was in the past, right? But the Super Bowl every single year grows and grows and grows. And then when you look at the top viewership, I think there's a list that comes out every year that's the top 100 viewed events across the year. And I want to say it's always something along 85% are football, right? So whether it's college football, whether it's college football, NFL football, and obviously the Super Bowl. Now we have a huge event, worldwide coming in with the World Cup, and that's going to rival that just because of the global focus there. But I still think that the Super Bowl, when you're speaking U.S. audiences, it's the one that brings everybody together. It's the one that has the most eyeballs. So is the price worth it? I mean, in a world of fragmented audiences, I mean, if you're trying to reach, bang for your buck, yes, I would say yes.
I love it. That's great perspective. Yeah, I think the campaignable moment, the earned story that you get around it, it's not just the eyeballs, it's everything. It's it's the biggest event in media. It's hospitality, it's activating at the game itself, it's social, it's just so much now. You mentioned World Cup. There's a lot of excitement building around that. I attended F1 for the first time this year in Vegas. Nice. Sports is becoming more and more globalized. You talk about NFL and, the Chargers going to Australia during the off season. And I forget what team went down to Sao Paulo, Brazil, but football is becoming global too, much like NBA had been able to reach out. And I think NBA is bigger in China now than it is in the US or something like that, maybe from a dollars of like merchandise sold. I don't know what metric they're using. But can you talk a little bit about the globalization of sports and how things that were popular in Europe, like F1 and soccer, are now more popular here? American sports is being exported on a more global stage. Sure. And how do you think about that from the perspective of a marketer when you guys are advising clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's how the leagues are thinking about it, right? All these leagues are thinking from a global perspective. So that's the benefit. And then just also the way that everything is a digital touch point at this point, whether it's social, whether it's, fans in China can get NFL highlights via social, right? That easily. So I just think that there's a huge audience everywhere else. And, you look at what Shohei's doing here and his impact globally, right? It's just amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing how sports kind of brings everybody together, and you add social in there and you're adding conversations and speaking directly to fans. I think it's the game changer, right? It's what makes everything global.
What do you think about the emergence of the branded content side? A lot of people say that the Drive to Survive show on Netflix, or things like the show that they did about the PGA Tour, and then you've got the Michael Jordan documentary. Sports entertainment outside of the actual games itself is becoming a massive category. And it almost becomes like a beachhead moment for some of these brands to enter new markets. A great opportunity for brands to tell stories along a lot of these sporting moments that maybe, generally aren't involved as national sponsors or being able to afford, the Super Bowl buy, but maybe they can do some of this branded content stuff. Be curious of how you think branded content is making sports marketing and sports media more interesting.
Yeah, I think it widens the audience, right? You're getting fans to watch something on Netflix. For example, not a huge golf fan personally, right? I'll watch it, no problem. However, the content on Netflix just brings it a whole different side of the game. It personalizes it for audiences. It brings in people that maybe aren't interested in the ins and outs of the sport, but they're interested in the reality TV side of it, right? So it brings that kind of reality TV element into the sports world, which is great. And I think, my wife, for example, huge fan of those documentaries on Netflix, just because again, it shows the personal side of the business. It takes these it takes these bigger than life personalities and people that, back in the day, you would never be able to understand what's going on inside the life of Tom Brady or something like that. But we're now, Aaron Rodgers, for example, you'd never even think about understanding the inside life of Aaron Rodgers, but now you get documentaries that kind of show that side of it. I can't believe I'm talking about Aaron Rodgers as a Bears fan, but
yeah, you guys had a tough one.
But yeah,
close.
Yeah,
close.
I think it brings these personalities that, again, we talk about the social aspect, and it just creates conversations. I think that's really what's driving sports in general is the amount of new fans that are coming into these sports. You talked a little bit about soccer and just how that's blown up in the United States, and I don't think the World Cup could be coming here at a better time, just to really be put on the world stage. So, yeah, it's good stuff. Branding content.
I love it. So would you talk a little bit about player activation? Back in the day, endorsement deals were fairly straightforward, right? You would, sign an endorsement deal and your player would show up maybe a few times a year to do an ad campaign, and they would be available for PR moments, and they would, be photographed by the paparazzi with, your brand maybe like in their personal life. But now sports stars and athletes from, and then the arrival of NIL and college and, being able to track these players down to the high school level now. These guys are really multifaceted media brands, if you think about it now, with their social following being this audience that they own. Guys like Aaron Rodgers and the Travis brothers, starting podcasts and then starting production companies where they produce some of this sports documentary content. And, their Instagram feed isn't just highlights and them in suits and stuff with watches. It like kind of shows their three-dimensional nature. And then you've got them starting their own brands and creating opportunities to be entrepreneurs that are also partnership opportunities for brands. So I wonder if you 360 activation working with athletes now and how that's evolved, especially in the world of social proliferation.
I mean, you kind of said it yourself, right? Like these guys, these girls are their own brands. So, it takes a lot more for a brand to work with these people that think that they are their own, in fact, brands. So, and again, I think the way that communication has shifted across the board, whereas, in years past, these people were a little bit put on a pedestal. Now they're trying to gain followers. They're trying to interact with more people. You just look at the amount of athletes that are active on social media in terms of just commenting on sports. One of the things that I find interesting is I'll watch UFC fights or something, and all the fighters are commenting on the fights that are happening live, right? Mm-hmm. So again, it's making sure that they're front and center in front of their own fans, but also it kind of provides that opportunity to, sponsored post, right? Like, so it's almost boosting their presence, and just acting as a brand themselves. So, super interesting.
Do you think does it devalue a team sponsorship at all, or does it enhance it?
I think it enhances it, right? Because it's, again, you're kind of getting that brand along with the team sponsorship, right? You have to, obviously, there's financial ramifications to it, right? But you look at what Miami FC's done in the MLS, and how much that brand has grown. I was fortunate enough to actually go to the MLS championship game a couple months ago, and just to see how that they actually play in a temporary stadium. So it's a very small, intimate stadium, and just to see the presence there because of Messi and how much that game has changed in that city because of one player. And I think you can look at that like kind of across sports, right? Like, look at LeBron. Anywhere LeBron goes, the brand that he goes to grows, right? I think that's a little bit fallen off right now that he's 40 plus years old. But I mean, you look at what Tom Brady did for the Buccaneers, right? Buccaneers weren't really much on the map, and Tom Brady comes and kind of changes the game for him, takes him to the Super Bowl, and it's a game changer. So, Yeah, I think, and we're kind of getting in this world, especially like with kids, where they more are fans of players than they are of teams, which is kind of crazy, right? It's almost flipped on its head. You see kids these days, and they have 20 different jerseys of their different favorite players, but then it's like, what's your favorite team? And none of them can answer that question. So it's more about players these days than it is about teams, kind of.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's drop into NIL and the NCAA for a moment, if you will. I recently had an opportunity to interview Deion Sanders' management, and kind of seeing what he's been able to accomplish at Colorado, and the idea of the celebrity coach. Like the coach who was a player at one point, now coaching either in the pros or down at the collegiate level, but also bringing this star power and this social media, influence to a new team, and injecting energy into a franchise at the collegiate level, and what that does for recruitment and building an incubator for NIL and helping these younger players grow their following and brands. Be curious of what your thoughts are around that. And is some of the economics around NIL and social clout and influence, is that doing what they were afraid, like kind of making it not as pure as it once was before all this stuff was not allowed?
For sure. Deion's one of one, right? There's not another Deion Sanders out there. So been super interesting to follow him, and to your point, the star power that comes out for those games, and it's just like a red carpet event on those sidelines at Colorado, which is crazy to see that level of program. It's not a powerhouse program, but to see the people that come through those doors is pretty cool. NIL has completely changed the whole entire college landscape, right? From the portal and how many people are getting into the portal, and it's almost become a form of free agency, which is pretty crazy, right? And it's also interesting to see that these players just are staying longer in college, which I think that is one of the benefits that nobody really talks about, right? It's I think in years past there's always players that regret leaving early, or especially I'd say like towards the NBA, they haven't really developed their game, but then they leave early and they're like, man, I wish I could have stayed. But now NIL gives everybody the opportunity to just stay. Look at Texas and Manning down there, and he didn't have as great of a season, but he's going to get paid handsomely for coming back for another year at Texas. So I just think that NIL has completely shifted the way everybody thinks about college sports. And it really is like it's become a business model, which is, you can take the good with the bad there. So
yeah, that's really interesting. I do like that idea of like now athletes don't have to rush trying to get to the pros. Like they can take their time, they can build their following, they can hone their game, and they can bump up when it makes sense for them and still get their degree if that's important to them for any reason. So I imagine, you playing ball as a young man, did that draw you into moving from the bigger holding company agencies where you worked on some more general market accounts? Did that draw you into an independent agency like rEvolution that has a focus in sports marketing?
Yeah, for sure. I think I started talking a little bit about how I got more on the strategy side, and I was working with Sprint at the time. And Sprint was a sponsor of the NBA. They were a sponsor of NASCAR. So they had multiple sports sponsorships. So I got really exposed to that side of the business in that particular role. And I found it super interesting, not only as being a sports fan, but also being a marketer and understanding how important those crowds are for brands. I think that's what it really kind of got me hooked on that. Following that, I got involved with Esurance, which was an insurance brand, and they did some Super Bowl advertising, and just being involved in that level of ideating around, hey, we have 30 seconds to make an impact here, and how much work went into just that 30-second spot, and months and months and months of work, and was really interesting to see that kind of side of the business. So that always made me kind of want to pursue the sports angle. And then rEvolution being independent, I think, is super attractive for me because it's such a vast difference from being at a holdco. It's very you used the word earlier, entrepreneurial. That's the feeling that you kind of get it working in an independent space. You really have your own voice, not a number, so it allows you the opportunity to really kind of think outside the box and not have to think within this hold close process, right? Be more reactive to what the client wants. Be very specific to what, and act kind of as an extension of the client. And that's what I feel has been kind of been a benefit for me, is just being able to almost embed myself within a client's marketing team and then really just do what's right for the brand. So that's what's been fun about working at independent. It really gives us that opportunity to do that.
I love it. So, all right, let's talk about the E in the revolution. So it's am I saying it right? Is it
Yeah.
pronounced revolution?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And then why the capital E in the middle, and what does that mean in the branding of the agency?
For sure. It's always been our handle. Little R, big E. I don't know the history behind it, I'll be completely honest. But it's been essentially our brand since day one, since I worked here. It's a way that we brand ourselves, and I think it sets ourselves apart. And I think that's really the goal at the end of the day. I don't know the truth behind it, to be honest.
Is the capital E kind of also talking about evolution? So it's like revolution, but then E makes you look at it again and say evolution, and kind of the evolution of the ecosystem and media and stuff like that.
Sure, let's go with that.
Yeah, there we go. We invented the story on our own. All right, let's talk about clients that have more limited budgets, but they want to get into sports. Do you advise them to start with like players or local teams, or do you advise them to go into some of these tier 2 categories where maybe it's less expensive? Now here in San Diego, we sadly lost the Chargers, but we've got the Clippers Division 2 team. We've got the Gulls, we've got the San Diego Waves, which is a women's professional soccer team. So how do you advise clients that want to get into sports, but they don't have the budget to compete at, the NFL and the NBA and the MLB and stuff like that?
Sure. I think it's all about knowing who you're trying to reach. Who's the audience you want to reach? Who's the audience you want to connect with? And then creating those connections. I think you talked about lower tier sports. You talked about different team deals. And I think that there's something for every brand out there, right? Whether you want to think about minor league baseball and you're kind of at that budget level, or you can think about a big name team and thinking kind of sponsorship adjacent, right? So how do we think about sponsoring podcasts that are specific to content about a given team? How do we think about maybe the way that we think about our digital advertising, and really just focusing on fans of a particular sport, or focusing on fans of a particular team, and being very niche with our thought process there, because I think audiences are fragmented. They're kind of everywhere. So I think we're in this period where it's about more thinking about those niche attributes, those niche things that people are into, and then kind of keying in on that. And then that can be the driver of, a big idea potentially.
Do you ever think about working with like influencers from the perspective that, like, obviously with influencers, you can work with the athletes themselves, and there are other types of people who are influential that are officially associated with the team, but there are also just influencers that happen to be diehard super fans of a particular team, a particular player, a particular sport. Do you ever think about influencers themselves as a way to activate fandom based on their own fandom?
Yeah, I mean, we do it. So we have a great team here at rEvolution that thinks about influencers in a given way, and how do we leverage their voices to really tell that story. So it's something we do with one of our clients, Continental Tire, around the MLS space, and thinking about how that fandom in MLS is so very specific to a team, and the supporter groups are very. It's intense, actually, how crazy these supporter groups are in the soccer space. So thinking of it from that lens, we've done a lot of that. So, and then you mentioned NIL too, and that's kind of the next level up from that.
That's great. So kind of the fans, and then the next level is NIL, and then you can kind of get into players and players, teams, and leagues from there.
Totally.
All right. So you guys have represented some sports betting clients. I don't know if you currently have a sports betting client under AOR, but just be curious of your perspective on the sports betting landscape. Obviously, it's growing tremendously. You've got these, incumbents like FanDuel and, the guys that are the big 800-pound gorillas in the space. And
Yep.
you've got the casinos, doing their deals and licensing at the individual state level. So lots of competition now. Vegas is down from a visitation perspective right now because, essentially, people's wallets are stretched and it's harder to travel right now. So just kind of curious of your take on the proliferation of betting, and what are you guys doing to help clients like Betfred break through in this, new landscape?
Yeah, Betfred was a client of ours, and super fun client to work on, in crazy space, just growing, especially a couple of years ago when this was kind of all starting to get legalized across various states. Really fun to help them launch and kind of get their way into various states. Crazy regulations, crazy rules and regulations that you have to get around, but super fun industry to work in. Super interesting because, to your point, it's the 800-pound gorillas in the room, right? So I think it's very hard for the independents to break through because, what are really your kind of key levers that you could pull? You could think about promos. How do they get someone in the door versus BetMGM or DraftKings or whatever, So I think it's going to continue to be interesting to see how that landscape develops, and if it really becomes kind of like a not monopolized but close to monopolized type industry where there's 4 or 5 big players in the game. I think it's just it's developing and it's happening super quick. So it's really fun to watch from afar too.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was the original Penn acquisition of Barstool, and then you've seen some other, e-commerce companies acquire struggling media brands. Like there's a food delivery company who acquired Tastemade. I just worked in the travel space with a online travel agency called Next Trip that acquired 2 fast-paced travel channels. So some of these e-commerce brands or companies that are closer to the consumer, they know they're not going to compete with the big boys on last click. So they're acquiring content assets thinking that they can kind of funnel own content and get signals from what people are watching and maybe get them into the funnel a little bit, build brand loyalty earlier in the, the customer journey, so to speak. Obviously that didn't seem to work out with Barstool. Curious, if you think that that's a good thesis for the space in general, but specifically, why do you think the Barstool Penn deal didn't quite pencil?
Great question. I believe in the thesis. I think what it is that especially these brands that have direct to consumer capabilities, they have their own data, so they understand their consumers better than anybody. So that's always a benefit, is having that first party data and being able to action off that and understand what your consumers are looking for. Always a benefit. I would say the Barstool Penn piece, I wonder if it's just there were more attractive offers, right? Like kind of ESPN came and swooped in, and I think ESPN's really making a play to be an all-encompassing sports, like the king of sports, right? They always have been the worldwide leader in sports, but with the the direct consumer products, it's almost like they're focusing on their brand very, very much first. One of the things that I always kind of wonder is, are they making a play at some point to almost corner the industry a little bit in the sports space, from the perspective of direct consumer partnership with Disney? So they'll always be available on Hulu Live. But does that mean the end of kind of your standard cable and the opting into the sports side of the platform? I do think it's the benefit of the leagues and whatnot that they're really expanding. You think about MLB's working with Netflix this year, and just how the industry in a whole is kind of moving. Super interesting. I think it just adds to that fragmentation conversation we were talking about earlier, right? It's the consumers everywhere, and bring it back to the Super Bowl. Everybody's going to watch the Super Bowl. So
Yeah, you brought another interesting thing headline. Cable penetration in households just fell below 50% for the first time in history. So we're down to 49%. And people are getting older that have cable boxes, and cord cutting continues to be a strong consumer behavior even amongst older generations. And you talked about the migration of sports rights to the streamers like YouTube and Netflix and Amazon. And pretty much, I feel like any streaming app you open up these days has sports rights and sports deals. Do you think this migration is kind of accelerating the demise of TV, fortunately or unfortunately?
I don't, because if you think about it, last year there was all the discussion about kind of bundling all the various sports services. There was a discussion around ESPN and TBS and all those kind of coming together, the TNT properties. Now that fell through, but I still think at some point there's always going to be something in a place that people can go kind of as a one-stop shop, because not everybody wants 15 different apps, right? What I thought was super interesting is that I saw a stat recently and said that the average household in the US subscribes to 7+ subscription services, which is insane when you really think about it. So, but I always wondered, how does that stack up? How does their bill stack up against a standard cable company, right? Because if you think about how cable was in the past, you had 215 channels, you probably watched 10, right? So that's kind of what streaming has become. It's like your favorite 10 channels or your favorite 10 brands that you go to for content. And I think it's just going to continue to evolve. I think, especially with regional sports networks kind of opting out of the standard cable model and moving more towards streaming, I think it's just going to continue to fragment, and it's going to become more niche in reaching these audiences.
Yeah, that would be a good app for somebody to create. Just be able to scan your credit card and figure out how many subscriptions you have. Because,
For sure.
For me, it's like I'm kind of an Apple TV guy, and then I get a lot of my subscriptions through Apple TV. But then we have Amazon, then we have Disney Plus, then we have Netflix, and they all have like add-ons that you can get through the platforms. Like I think we have Stars through Amazon. And then you've got these like long tail, like newspapers and independent creators and people who you follow. So yeah, I'm sure it's more expensive at this point. And
yeah, and like content is getting catered towards what you want to see at the end of the day. So you can sit here and program your Amazon Fire Stick or your Roku device, and it's exactly the content that you want to see at all times, right? So it's, again, that's why these like niche interests are really popping when you think about it. We talked about sports and how the NFL resonates pretty broadly. But I think as you get more niche, it's even better for smaller brands, because they can actually find a place where they fit, So I think that the fragmentation is bad on some levels, but can really be good for smaller brands that are trying to break through.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right. I know you're a big fan of the NFL draft. What are opportunities like the draft and the combine and some of these other adjacent NFL events that aren't part of the normal season? Are those a good opportunity for brands to dip their toes into some of these areas without committing to like a larger league or year-long program? And then also in regards to the draft, how do you think about fantasy and getting your clients involved in the world of fantasy, which is so exciting to, communities and people. And it's kind of like that idea of dark social where people are communicating about fantasy every single day in their text threads or their, on the platform. So be curious of how you think about that in your media buys.
I would say on the kind of speaking to your first point about NFL and NFL draft and kind of those smaller outside of regular season opportunities, I think they're great, right? It is an opportunity to expose your brand. The NFL is kind of a different beast though, right? They are a 365 monster, right? Always thinking about their brand. And I think to even get access to some of that is you really have to be a league partner at this point. Now there are ways to go around that, right? There's ways to, work with ESPN or work with NFL Network, and kind of do buys that way to get around that inventory. Think about features, think about how we can integrate ourselves into the broadcast itself. So yeah, I think that's a great way to dip your toe, especially to figure out if you're eventually destined to be a league partner. That's a good way to dip your toe. When it comes to fantasy, I think that's what's great about social conversations, right? Especially when you think about if you have league deals, if you have team deals, how do you leverage that social conversation that's happening around fantasy and promote that partner deal that you have, or think about that team deal? And it really becomes a kind of a fuel that you can think about for your audiences and who you're trying to reach at any given time. But also, you mentioned also the gambling apps. DraftKings and FanDuel are their own media companies at this point.
They're
They are
essentially retail media networks.
totally.
Yeah.
So, it's all going back to fandom and how do we capitalize on that? And, um, these smaller brands in terms of players and how they're building things out. And, it's interesting. I just think the possibilities are essentially endless when you really think about it.
You're never more engaged than when you've got money on a game, right?
That's facts. That's facts.
All right. We made it 36 minutes without talking about AI, but we have to at least address it.
Yeah, for sure.
What's the number one way that you're using AI as an agency operator at your agency that is actually having an impact and transforming the way you guys do business?
I think it's about synthesizing data and how do we look at these massive data farms and try to understand and synthesize it down to insights and takeaways. I think at the end of the day, it's a tool in our toolbox, right? It's a way to, help us work more efficiently, help us, think about how we leverage data more granularly. But yeah, I think the crazy part is it's really involved in every aspect of our day as marketers, right? When we think about programmatic buys, I was actually just building a deck on AI today, and talking about leveraging platform AI and how it really makes everything that we do smarter, in terms of our bid process, in terms of our audiences and growing our audiences and understanding what are some of those various attitudinal aspects that we can kind of target and think about that link back to first party data or things of that nature. So yeah, it's involved in every aspect. And I mean, everything from helping me write an email to synthesizing data down to, nuggets that we can kind of pull away and think about audiences. So it's interesting and it's kind of crazy to see where it's going to go from here.
Yeah, I agree. I was at the IAB yesterday, and the big talk is, the hype last year was just AI in general, and now it's AI agents. So we're gonna be able to tell these robots and go do all these things on our behalf. I haven't drank that Kool-Aid just yet, but I'm sure it's coming.
You'll be there.
All right. All right. So let's talk a little bit about your little bit outside of the office. So you were an athlete in, I imagine, both high school, but definitely in college. What did playing team sports do to prepare you for leadership, in an office setting and when you got into your career?
Yeah. It kind of, it molds you to really think about others, not just yourself. Right. It's, we, especially at rEvolution, it's very sports focused and it is a team atmosphere, right? And I work not only with my media team, but also with all the teams across the agency. So I think just the aspect of teamwork and the aspect of understanding it's bigger than just you and your thought process. I think that's kind of always laddered down into how I lead my teams or people that I've been coached in the past. So yeah, man, it's and especially football, just because it's so strategic and how we think about the next play, that next play mentality, that Mamba mentality that Kobe always talked about. Yeah, it's cool, man. I think it's truly shaped my life. every aspect of how I work, and is I kind of go back and I learn lessons from various coaches or various teammates that I played with, and just a cool way to think about life and how things work and big play mentality.
I love it. And I know you're a fan of DIY. Is that something that you like to do at home to kind of zone out and do
Oh
you
man,
use that to clear the space in your head and get creative?
I'll tell you what, that nugget must have came out prior to me having kids, because that DIY is
It's
that's
gone
out the
now.
window. That's out the window at this point. They take up all my free time, which is great. But man, I do like to just be hands on with things, and kind of, it does exactly what you're saying. Helps you zone out, helps you kind of put the outside world away, and focus on something that's just different, right? Like I could have pursued, any of us could have pursued certain things, but I think it's good to have hobbies too.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, those are things of the past for the next couple of years. I think DIY.
Hopefully AI will free up our time a little bit more to either
There you go.
spend time with the kids or do
They
projects.
babysit? Does AI babysit these days? Or?
Well, the robots will. The Optimus robots will.
Yeah.
All right. So, stand-up comedy, is that something that you're just a fan of, or did you actually go out there and do open mics and
Oh
stuff like
no,
that?
no,
No, you
never
did it?
did any open mics. When I was a kid, I always wanted to.
Yeah.
But I think it's helped me with my public speaking, at least, and just realizing how to handle a crowd and how to read a room and things of that nature. I just like to laugh. I just like to have a good time. That's why it's a passion of mine. I always used to. It used to be a crazy passion of mine where I would, my wife and I, when we first started dating, we would go to comedy shows once, twice a month. Just good
Wow.
time.
Wow. That's so cool.
And some of the greats. So yeah, it's definitely a hobby, that, and going to concerts and things of that nature. Definitely a hobby of mine.
Yeah, the last the last overnight date that I did with my wife without the kids was to see Jim Gaffigan in Vegas.
Nice.
And yeah, it
Nice.
was absolutely amazing.
He's a genius to do it without swearing too,
Exactly. The guys that, I enjoy comedy of both flavors. But yeah, the guys that can stay brand safe are definitely have like a whole nother level. One of the reasons I asked you is I'm taking stand-up comedy classes right now, but really
Nice.
my only goal is to be able to go on stage and make jokes about the industry and then put them on my LinkedIn. So
there you go.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, sorry that we didn't get to do this in person in Chicago, but I really enjoyed your insights and, learned a lot about the sports marketing industry in our conversation today. So if folks enjoyed the conversation that we had today, if there's a brand marketer out there that's thinking about maybe trying to get into the sports area and they want to connect with you or the agency, where would you like to point folks?
You can go to our website, revolutionworld.com. It have all the information about the agency, has all the information about everybody all the wonderful people that work at Revolution. So that's the starting point. And then, feel free to reach out to me on the socials. Look for me on socials, and I'm always around. Easy to find.
Appreciate it. Thanks, bud. And for those of you who are watching at home, if this is the first time you're, give us a follow or a subscribe. You give us an honest review on whatever podcast platform you might be listening to the show. That's how we find a larger audience organically. And last but not least, if there's a marketer out there, maybe a sports fan, somebody who you think who would maybe need to get into the sports category to help grow their brand, don't forget to share the show. And with that, Bill, I will wish you a good evening. Appreciate you spending a little bit of your evening with us, staying up late in Chicago.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Cheers.